Okay, well, welcome everybody to the July Security Series. This session is designed to answer any questions that you have for security. It could be of any nature. And we'll be addressing questions in a classroom as well as through Adobe Connect. If you do have a question in the classroom, please raise your hand and I'll be passing around the microphone. We do have quite a lot of construction going on right now, so it might be loud at times, and you may need to readdress your answer as needed through Adobe Connect so they can hear you. But otherwise, we can go ahead and get started. We do have some questions that came through the Harvard Live question tool as well that we can address up front, or we can address your questions first.
Hi, I'm Paul Kletchka. I'm on the incident response team.
Ed Smiley, compliance manager.
Matt Socio, intrusion detection.
Kyle Crane, I work on PII scanning and encryption.
Kathy Kimball, I'm the head of security operations and services.
All right, and I'm Jen Stewart, and I'll be moderating your session. So do we have any questions from the classroom that you would like to address? All right, Paul, I have a question for you that came through the Harvard Live tool.
Okay.
Can you tell me more about the incident response team and when I should report an incident?
Okay, so the incident response team really deals almost with every case that we have coming through SOS. Our highest volume of things are dealing with compromised computers, and we are helping to coordinate the response when one of those is found. So that I feel is probably the biggest thing that we're doing from day to day. When something comes in, and we have a very wide variety of issues that do come into us, if it relates to one of our more well-defined areas, so one of these folks who's sitting up here with me, we may have something come in and we'll hand it off to them if we know that they're the folks to deal with it. But we do get those incidents where we just aren't certain that there is a particular area, or it's a fairly rare sort of case. And there I'm thinking about some of our interactions with law enforcement. We do assist law enforcement quite a bit. We'll do things like help find missing people. If there is a student or a staff member who is missing, they will contact us to see if we can assist in that. Harassment cases, things of that sort. Those are not terribly frequent. So, the incident response folks are there, and we know how to deal with that sort of thing. But for the most part, we're really coordinating a response amongst the different teams that are in our office, because so often we do find that there is a lot of cross-pollination with these things. As far as what you might want to report to us, we are detecting a lot of things, so a lot of the cases that we deal with are generated by our office. But if folks think that their personal access account may be compromised, if they see some sort of strange activity on that, certainly call that into us. That's something that we want to help you out with. We can look into it and determine if indeed it is compromised, and if it is, we can get it locked and get you protected right away. That's probably one of our big ones right there. I think, in terms of other incidents that you would call in on, if you suspect that a machine is compromised, but you haven't been notified about it, definitely call us. We can look into that and determine if there has been a compromise beyond something as simple as your antivirus program catching something. There is potentially a lot more happening with that machine, and we want to know about it. So those are a couple of things there, and I don't want to take a whole lot of time. We do go into detail on our website about the incidents that we want you calling in and reporting, or writing into us and reporting on. So I would definitely say check that out.
Right.
Would you like the microphone, Jen?
Maybe. You can hear me now? Okay. So are there any questions with what Paul had mentioned about incident response? Any through Adobe Connect?
guess my question would be, what would we look for to make us suspect that a computer was compromised?
So certainly, antivirus popping up is one thing. Now, that isn't always an indicator that there's some major compromise on your machine. But certainly, if your machine suddenly slows down to a crawl, you get some strange pop-up, those are things to look for. Now, initially what you want to do is go to your local IT folks. They're going to be able to help you out with that quite a bit. And they can really be a good judge as to whether or not that is something worth contacting us about. But those are really the good indicators right there. That slowing to a crawl, completely crashing out of nowhere for no easily explainable reason. The pop-ups like the fake antivirus, that's a really big one that hit us a while back here.
So to speak a little bit to that detection side of things, I mean, it isn't just the end user, the host computers, the desktop stuff, but there are times where we see applications and servers being abused too, and so that's where auditing logins, if you have any sort of monitoring and you see spikes or drop-offs in traffic, or if you have a baseline of what this server does on a day-to-day basis and you see anomalies from that cause you to then dig deeper into logs. I mean, that's the kind of stuff we're looking at as far as the at the border level. And if you guys are doing that at a lower level, it really helps us out, because obviously we don't have access to all the logs and all the network traffic from that point of view.
And I think on those ones, those are the ones we're particularly interested in on the application side. A lot of times we'll see like defacements of websites and people are just like, oh, okay, I'll just clean that up, but it could lead to a bigger problem if somebody actually got root access to your server or a database behind it. So for ones like those, we usually recommend that you give us a call. Sometimes we can see some of that stuff from our end, but a lot of times it'll be noticed by a user using the site, and they might contact the webmaster. So those things we usually recommend just letting us know, so we can act upon to see if we can dig any further back on what we have to see what happened.
And I know I've been out in the units and it's been like, oh, I don't want to contact SOS because I did something wrong. But in all honesty, when we're able to see what happened, like if you said, hey, yesterday XYZ happened, and we can look through the network logs and say, oh, yeah, we need to watch for this now. And we can actually then improve, what we're looking for at the border and make that part better. So we really do, we are willing to help, recover from those situations and things like that. But we also want that data so that we can, improve what we're looking for.
We have a question regarding encryption. Is there a site license available?
I'll answer that in a long form to try to generate some more questions. Encryption in its current form in SOS is a newer project. It's something that has been going on for a while. It started out as Sophos and Utimaco was the product that was in use. Now we're using a product called SecureDoc by WinMagic, which is full disk encryption for both Windows and Mac devices. There is a mobile component to it also. We're not quite into that yet. That's a little bit further down the road. Some of the advantages of SecureDoc over the previous tool that we had, there's a central web console. So yeah, I know another central console to worry about. But on the Mac side, so Mac encryption's been a problem for a while. On the Mac side, it actually uses, or can use, its own encryption algorithm, or it can leverage FileVault 2 encryption. So you can encrypt your Mac like you would out of the box with FileVault 2. You install SecureDoc on it, and then it sends that key back to the console. So you don't have to worry about somebody writing that key down, where they're going to store it, or they're going to tape it to the bottom of their laptop just in case they ever need it. We have that ability now to capture that information. Within the console itself, it's broken down. We have a couple units in, and basically all you can see are your devices and your users within your unit. From the console, you can add more users to a device. So if you have, your own account that you're using to administer multiple devices, that way if you need to log into them, if somebody leaves or whatever, you can just go in and add accounts to devices. It also has the ability, in the case that something were to go wrong with the machine while it was encrypted, they provide plenty of resources for how to recover data off that machine, which is nice. A lot of people have asked if they can use their own encryption still, and you can certainly do, if you were using BitLocker, TrueCrypt, anything like that. But again, the advantage to SecureDoc is that you can centralize everything, you can manage your keys, manage your devices, manage the users, and it kind of gets everything in one place for you. If there's any specifics on that, I'll be happy to answer them, but that's a general overview of it.
Okay. Will Utamako eventually be phased out?
Yeah, there is pretty much the only thing left from Utamako is the private crypto tool that's on downloads. That's probably what people use the most, which was just like a little container encryption piece that you could, put something in, send it to somebody else, send them a key. They didn't have to have any software installed. They could just, it was like a self-extracting type executable. That's all that's left. We did just get a license for what SecureDoc calls their self-extractor, which is pretty much an exact replacement for private crypto. It's a little easier to use and a little better in some cases. So right now we're doing some documentation for that. That'll go up on downloads. We think what's going to happen right now is we're going to leave private crypto around for a little bit. The way the licensing works with that is, it is what it is. We don't get updates for it anymore, which is why we need to replace it. But we're going to leave it around for a little bit, let the community know that it's going to go away. That way if you have anything encrypted with it, you'll be able to get it and get it into a SecureDoc format or something else. And I'm sure we'll keep a copy of it somewhere in SOS just in case that occasion arises where somebody says, hey, I had this in private crypto and I don't see that up on downloads anymore.
Any questions? Do we have any through Adobe Connect?
Mark asks, is SOS looking at file encryption as opposed to FDE?
So initially it's going to be full disk encryption, and that's our main concern at the moment. WinMagic and SecureDoc can do file and folder encryption. That's something that we'll look at down the road a little bit. Right now the immediate need is pretty much for full disk, but that is something that's certainly on the table. That's something the product can do. We're just not quite there yet. We're trying to kind of roll out in stages and pieces. So right now it's full disk encryption only.
Okay, I have another question. Is it true that I can scan for my own vulnerabilities instead of sending a request to SOS?
Yes, that is true. We introduced a self-service scanning tool called Security Center. It's actually a console for our Nessus vulnerability scanner. So in the past, when there would be a request for a vulnerability assessment, we would basically run it through Nessus, package up the results, send it out. We now have a service out there where we'll have accounts for users, the IP space that you're allowed to have based on the backbone contact list will be added to that, and then you'll be able to scan the IPs that are in your contact range. And then you'll be able to track results. You'll be able to do rescans whenever you want. So if you find an issue, you go out and fix it. You can immediately come back and scan. There won't be a need to put in a new request for us to do that for you. One of the things that we will continue doing are the compliance scans. We have to do scans for our purchasing card industry data security standard. So those scans will continue to do We have other internal policy scans that we will initiate. But as far as the routine scan goes, I know that we're working closely with Audit to get them access into the console, so they'll be able to view those scans. So when they ask you to do vulnerability scans, they'll be able to go in there and review those results. Basically, if you're not aware of that, go ahead and send a message into security@psu.edu. We have a lot of units on board already. Basically, just a simple setup of accounts and then what IP space that you have access to. And once that's all set up, you'll be able to run scans on your own IPs.
And just anybody submit a scan request, or should it go through your IT staff? Is there a process for that?
As far as doing the scans, the way we have the tool set up is that currently we're assigning individual users. In a new version of Security Center, there's going to be enough granularity in the permissions to allow, perhaps we have a unit contact or several unit contacts, and then they'll be able to dole out permissions below that. So if you have a college and say you want that separated up by departments and you want certain people to do certain departments, in the new version, that'll be able to be handled in that way. Right now, we just have 2 or 3 contacts that are able to do the scans per IP range.
Todd asks, is there an effort to establish a minimum security standard for desktops and laptops?
Yes. We are reviewing, right now, it is within ITLC, the IT Leadership Council, minimum security baselines, which are very close. If you'll remember from a few years ago, there was the data classification, which is already a policy now. Along with those were the security standards, which have been converted to the minimum security baselines. And basically, they will be the baselines necessary to meet depending on what type of data that you hold, and they're broken down into one is public type data and the other is internally controlled and restricted. As I said, right now that is in front of ITLC for comment, and then once it comes out of there, it's going to head down towards the policy pipeline, whether that's something to be added to data categorization or another policy, or becoming its own policy. So look forward to that soon, and talk with your ITLC representative. If you want to have some comments or any questions about that.
Okay. Since you had mentioned about data categorization, can you just speak a little bit about what the timeline is for rolling that out into production?
Right. Yeah. So we are just finishing up a pilot with Digital Library Technologies. Some of you might have seen some of our previous talks. So we did a pilot with them to go through the process of data categorization. Really, the phase 1 is just going to deal with identifying the types of data that people are holding. Starting in the next few months, we're going to actually go to some of the higher risk areas that might have more of the sensitive information and actually start there, start the process, and then after that, it'll go to the rest of the university. Right now, in the first phase, we're aiming towards administrative data, so it will go towards staff members. We understand that research data really has a different life cycle compared to our administrative data, so we're going to focus in on the administrative data. Then at a later time after that to focus on the faculty and the research data.
Mike asks, encryption of SSDs, issues or concerns?
It's supported. There's a big list on WinMagic's website of what devices are supported. There's a lot of them. It's not like they just support 5 or 6 devices. My laptop, I have an SSD in, and that's actually the best way to go because you get that instant on-off encryption. You don't have to sit there and wait 2 hours until the device encrypts, depending on what size drive you have. So no, it is supported. It works really well. Like I said, there is that list, and it was actually right on WinMagic's homepage just the other day. And we'll get it and download it, and we'll put it up on our wiki. That way everybody can see what devices are supported.
And Kyle, was there a link to the wiki somewhere that people can easily access that?
There is a link to the wiki on the encryption portion of the SOS webpage. If you go to the security operations website, drill down to the encryption page, you can get a link into the wiki.
Another question from James. Any chances all of these new services and their respective web consoles, encryption, scanning, etc. will start leveraging access accounts rather than separate accounts in the future?
Yeah, to speak with a few of the tools that we use on the compliance side, Security Center, we have worked with Tenable, and hopefully in the next version coming in December that will use access accounts. It was actually something that we had to leverage our contract with them. We put it specifically in a contract to get that to happen. A lot of the services we launched that are launching enterprise-wide will require, we SOS will require the vendor to use our single sign-on. So for Security Center, that will happen. We're soon going to unveil a self-service web application assessment tool that will also be the same, where we'll use access accounts. So as far as a lot of the newer services we're coming up with, that'll be the plan to do that.
Okay. So I have a question regarding two-factor authentication. I've been hearing a lot of buzz around the project for two-factor. Can you just speak a little bit about the project in general and if I will be required to use it?
Yeah, so there has been an attempt to look at two-factor. I mean, we do have two-factor systems now through the mainframe, and a lot of people access that with the GI, but that was always really intended for our business systems. And looking at scaling it out and up, it wasn't necessarily the best way to do that. So late this spring, SOS and the new identity services paired up to get this project on track. And identity services is actually going to end up owning this service and this project, which is it's good to know that we have a home for the service once we get that moving. So what we did with that is in May, we had a meeting with a lot of people that either are running two-factor or have expressed interest in it, and some of the other admins around Penn State and Hershey and places like that, where folks have critical data that we assume they are going to want this or need it when data categorization gets to that level of maturity. So we gathered the requirements, we distilled those out and created like a weighting matrix, put those requirements out for the community to look at, and gathered some feedback till about the 1st of July. And so where we are right now is working with purchasing to see what our options are as far as an RFP or a sole source, and looking at what the various vendors, how we're going to approach that part of it. And as far as will I be required, it really depends on what you're doing. I mean, there's, as we look at data categorization, I mean, the first stage of that is just to inventory the data, but once it gets far enough along where for the public or for the restricted and the PSU internal data, there are going to be a lot of applications that people touch that two-factor is going to be a requirement. So and it's to protect things that you want private anyway, or things that the government says you have to keep private, like FERPA data or things like that. So one of the interesting quotes I came across while we were doing a lot of this research is that the password username password combination is kind of reaching a point where it's not good enough anymore. Passwords are easy to, people are tricked out of those in some cases. They're stolen on the wire in some cases. They're actually pulled off of servers in cases. And even when they are hashed and encrypted, the technology to break that stuff nowadays exists, even for stuff that we thought was SHA-1 can be cracked reasonably now. So it is getting to a point where the password isn't good enough, even if it is complex. So it has been a long time coming. Senior leadership sees the need for it. So it is something we want to get the word out there and have people aware that it is coming, and we hope that it is something that's actually easy enough to use that most people won't even notice.
Can you talk just a little bit about how the delivery might take place, whether it be a physical token or something that comes across on your cell phone?
Yeah, I mean that's one of the things, when we talk about scaling out and scaling up, the token distribution has really been a problem for us. We have tokens sitting on a shelf. A lot of times they get delivered. The battery's already 3 years done, so we're not getting our money's worth, and yet the unit is paying for that token. So we really want to look at leveraging people's smartphones and use either what's called a push notification. So if you imagine I'm about to log into my application here, and your phone buzzes and it says, "Hey, I see you're logging into application X. Is this correct? Yes or no?" And you hit yes, I want to log in, and then boom, you go through. That's actually a really, it's low friction for the user, but the way the certificates work, it's actually a really good secure way of basically saying that. And then if somebody gets that notice, like you're out at dinner tonight, you're not logging into anything, and you get this notice on your phone that somebody's trying to log into that, you say no, and then it asks, well, did you make a mistake, or is this fraud? And if you click the fraud piece, there's now something actionable there to go and look and see, hey, is something up here? So it's actually a really neat situation. But then one of the things we really want to do is make sure that there's a broad coverage too. So we want to be able to if you don't necessarily have a smartphone, can you get a text message? Can you get a phone call that says, hey, your passcode for the next 60 seconds is 12345. So we want to be able to have a wide array of options in addition to using the token that you're probably already carrying around if you access IBIS, ISIS, or report grades and things now.
If somebody in my department is leaving and they want to take their email with them, is that acceptable? Or are there any policies or procedures around that practice?
So with a request like that, obviously prior to an employee leaving, they have access to their system and can do pretty much whatever has been allowed locally there. So if they gather up their email and have some sort of archive that they have with them already, unless there is a specific questioning process when they leave about that and they're told not to take it, then they're going to take it with them. If they've already left and they're requesting that, that is something that has to go through HR, and there needs to be approval there, and we then can assist with that process to help gather that information and get it back to the user. But it is definitely at that point an HR issue, so it isn't something where you and your individual unit can just go in, grab their mailbox, and give it to them. Once they are officially no longer a university employee, that changes things drastically.
And I'd just like to add, and I actually just saw this a week or two ago, use a listserv address, use an alias. We find lots of units will tie a very important, where people send in information for a program to a single email address. And then if that person leaves the university or goes to another unit, a lot of times, because that is typically spread out everywhere, people will, for months and years afterwards, still get email to that address. We find it a lot when people unfortunately pass away unexpectedly, and they'll have emails coming to that address for a specific program, and we'll then have to monitor that email account for a certain period of time to get those business-related emails and forward it to the right people. So we've been encouraging people, anywhere where you have a single point of failure where something is coming directly to a single email address, change that to a listserv or an alias where it could go to multiple people, and then that way, we won't have to spend the time to monitor the email to send on any business-related issues.
And one of the best things to help the local IT folks is to have a good relationship with your local HR rep. And if you can just let them know that the more time you have to plan for this sort of thing, the better. As I said, prior to the employee actually leaving, it's relatively easy to get these things done. After they're gone, it becomes far more difficult and a lot more hoops have to be jumped through. So, if the HR folks are aware that a termination is going to happen, the sooner they can get in touch with us, get in touch with employee relations, because all of these things have to be approved through central HR, the better, because it's much easier to be proactive than reactive.
Does the same hold true if somebody wants to take, let's say, some work documents with them, or if they want to listen to somebody else's voicemail?
As far as work documents, that really comes down to a departmental level. I mean, folks need to determine if those work documents are appropriate to be taken. I don't think that we can really give an answer there. And I'm sorry, what was the second part of that question? Voicemail. Again, voicemail much easier to deal with prior to someone leaving, because of course line ownership means everything with that. So if an employee has already left and there are voicemails sitting in their mailbox, then that is a situation where we have to work with TNS, get those voicemails, go through them, because we are the one trusted third party on campus to be able to go through that information. And then we would get those things back to you. That process takes much longer than if prior to the employee leaving, ownership is changed or the alternative greeting is turned on so the mailbox can no longer accept messages, because that's really the ideal thing. You want to have that line forwarding to either the temporary person who's going to be covering for that person, or have the line ownership changed completely to a new person.
Okay. Any questions in the class? All right, I think I have one here for Kimball. What is the status of the litigation hold requirements for the pending Sandusky related trials?
It's the same as it's always been. Preserved. And that will be the case for probably many years. Is there more specific?
There are not, but whoever posted the question, please feel free to add additional questions just to follow up if you have any.
Right, all of the people who are involved in that will have received their litigation hold by now. If there is a system element involved, their IT staff should know about it by now. Most of the material, I would say, everything we know about has been preserved in a way that it can be turned over to either the investigators or the court system. But that doesn't mean you then are relieved from the obligation to keep it. So we have to hold it. We have had several sessions with the lawyers who are involved in the Sandusky investigation. We can do that again if there are specific questions that the community has that they don't feel have been adequately addressed. Okay, I don't know that I heard all of that. Could you repeat the first part of that? Right.
At the beginning, and I thought there was going to be a review process to go through and find out which systems. I know like Angel was one of them, and IBIS was another one of them. Are there going to be review processes to go through some of that? I know we've been doing that.
I believe there was a message from Kevin and the attorneys that said the level at which you had to preserve or not preserve, and it did relate to some of the systems. If that wasn't sufficient, I'll have to go back and query, because I don't think there's anything ongoing as a process right now beyond the letter that Kevin and the attorneys sent.
Okay, we have another question. The New York Times recently printed an article related to the number of university environments being under attack. Are we detecting any of these attacks?
Who wants to handle that one? Okay.
Is that on? Is it working? Yes, we are. So yeah, we have as far as the detection piece, we have two internet connections. One goes to Philadelphia, one goes to Pittsburgh, and TNS mirrors those for us. So we get to see all of our border traffic, and we feed those into a couple different analytical tools. We use Snort for that, and that gets us a lot of good information, especially at the host level. And then we have some custom stuff, and we have in the past couple of years started looking more at the server level and like our web servers, rogue logins, things like that. And yes, we see all sorts of attempts at cross-site scripting, SQL injection, tons of brute force SSH login. If there's any sysadmins out there, I mean, it's funny because if you just move SSH off of port 22, that stuff pretty much goes away. And I mean, that's not real security, but that literally these sweeps we see, and we see them from hostile nation states. We see them from people with a lot of time on their hands. It's there's a lot of different places the threats are coming from. And the thing is that as we've been watching them over the past few years, the tools that they're using are becoming more sophisticated. They're becoming harder to detect. So yes, we do see that. We have suffered quite a bit of loss in that space. It is something we are very concerned about and actively watching and actively helping people to understand what's going on, mitigate some of these issues, recover from that when it does, hit home.
Yeah, and I don't think we can stress more that it really takes all of you to really look for a lot of this stuff too, because as Matt mentioned, we see a lot from hostile nations, but we also see very targeted attacks. We see smart attacks that might compromise an IP at another EDU and then come in and look like regular traffic. I mean, we see tons of traffic from other EDUs all the time. So really, from what we see at our end, we can only do so much, and really, we need you guys, boots on the ground, seeing server logs and application logs to be looking for things and letting us know when you see things, because as they get smarter, they're not just always blasting SSH scans or SQL scans. They're actually making it look like legit traffic.
Yeah, and to sort of give you an example of as these attacks evolving, is it always used to be when somebody pop an account, it was just used to spam. And you could see on webmail, it was real easy to catch, 500 messages in 3 seconds, that's done. But what we're starting to see now is people sit on stuff. And that's really scary, because if they get a hold of a resource, whether it's an account or a machine or whatever, and then they sit and wait, and they don't do anything with it for a couple months, our forensics trail dies. But to give you an example of where we've seen this stuff happen is somebody will get an account, and instead of using it for spam, they'll get on the VPN and start to download library resources. And we'll only learn of that because, hey, these folks, you've exceeded your licensing limit for this subscription. And we're like, ooh, that's different. And we've seen where people have actually gotten on the VPN, set up a server class machine, and direct malware attacks to our network. And that's new. That's scary stuff, because I mean, again, once it's on the VPN, we don't, as SOS, don't necessarily have visibility there, because our visibility is at the border. And if they're using an encrypted tunnel, we're in trouble. So it has been getting more and more advanced and harder to see.
Yeah, and I think I want to emphasize that more and more of these are data-driven attacks. They're not, as everybody alluded to, they're not just going in there for jollies. They are going after data. They're going after your personal data. They're going after our sensitive institutional data. And these are not just, the New York Times article was focused in on nation states more than organized crime, but that's been out there for a long time too. And it's a very ugly situation. The number of probes attempting to get into Penn State is, Mike Pekesh hates it when we make him look at that number, but it's around 19, 20 million a day attempting to get into us. We have seen much more of the application level attacks, as was alluded to, particularly the SQL injection type things. And if you programmed these a long time ago where you weren't paying attention to error checking, they're going to be in. And we have noticed things where they'll come in, they'll take the table type format, and then later on they'll come back for the data. So it's not a good situation. It's rather a scary situation. We also have them getting a lot smarter about if they compromise an account and they go off and do something privileged under that account, and say they trigger an email response back. They'll go in and delete that email notification to the real user, so the real user doesn't know unless the real user happened to be on at that time. So the email notification back isn't even good enough, which leads into the second factor discussion.
How long does a typical web application scan take?
This is actually a pretty common question. For the web application assessments, once we actually get it started, typically we have a backlog. But when we do get it started, it usually takes at least a week, because we're doing multiple things. Like for a vulnerability assessment, we're usually running our tool and getting some results back. That's usually a pretty bang-bang type situation. But with a web application assessment, because every web application is different, we're running some tools against it. We're also doing some manual checking, because a lot of times the automated tools won't find everything. We have people who are specifically trained to do web application assessments, and so they're able to notice things. We would love to spend a month in every application that we get. Unfortunately, we can't. It usually takes around a week. And a large part, too, is also, doing false positive checking. We want to make sure that the results that we give back are as accurate as possible. Unfortunately, with some of the tools, because every website is coded differently, there could be a lot of false positives, so we try to weed out a lot of those as possible. Sometimes we can't get them all, but we usually get a good amount of them. That adds to the time. we usually say a week for the typical website, but a lot of times we'll get a request for a single website, but within that website there could be 50 sub websites that are actually individual sites themselves. So really it just all depends on what you submit and actually what it's doing. If it's a static web page with just content posted up, that could be as simple as a day or two. But if it is a large complex web app, it could be a couple weeks. But typically the average is about a week.
And how far in advance would you recommend people contact you if they're spinning up a new site?
We typically say as soon as possible. We'll go in as early as you see feasible. Obviously, if you have a lot of coding to do, it might not be as good to go in super early, because if you're continuing coding, then we'll just have to test it again. But letting us know as early as possible, that can get you in the queue. Typically, longer than we typically get them. Some as early as a couple hours before the site goes live. Some a day. We usually like to shoot for a couple weeks. We can usually fit that in. But really, as soon as you can, we will do multiple assessments. So if you have a development cycle that you would like us to test at certain certain places in your development cycle, we can do that. We don't mind testing it multiple times. But yeah, just as early as you can get it in helps us get it scheduled and help you guys get into the queue.
I know I asked you this question a couple of years ago. I thought I'd ask again. What ability do you have to impersonate in a web application scan particular roles? Like, for example, incoming freshman student or faculty member or graduate student, that kind of thing. To what extent can you do that?
Well, one thing, it'll depend on the type of authentication. If you're talking from like a central AIS, the accounts we typically have are non-member accounts. We could sometimes work with accounts and with AIS to get a specific level. Typically, the ones we use typically are just member accounts. If it's a local authentication, we can use any, if you make an account for us, we can leverage that account. We've done assessments for specific units who will, make 5 accounts that have 5 different levels of permission throughout the application, and we'll be able to use those. From a central standpoint, it's actually something now that we have the Identity Services Group form. It might be something that we look at to be able to like you said, do something like a faculty or or a student, because most of our granularity is either a member or full access. We don't usually get down, at least from an official access account point of view. But that's actually a good point to bring up with them.
Okay. Are there any new PII initiatives going on?
I'm not sure what exactly is meant by initiative. I can give you just a quick little update of where things are at. The 6.3 dot releases that are out now are the last release of version 6 from Identity Finder. Version 7 will be the next thing. That's what we're testing. There's quite a few new features in that, so it's going to take us some time to go through it. By the time we get everything tested, all of our infrastructure upgraded, packages created, that's going to be, late fall, pushing end of the year to get 7 out. So where the version 6 releases right now, the last Windows 1 addressed a problem specifically with Outlook and email scanning. So from there, things seem pretty stable. And that's kind of where we're at right now, is working with Identity Finder, working with version 7, ironing out all the bugs on our end, and getting that ready for deployment. Yeah, we have the thanks Ed, the SOS Manage Baseline, Manage Baseline Plus Plus. If you're an identity finder contact, we put a lot of this information out on the wiki and on the listserv. Basically, the idea of the Manage Baselines is that we maintain this baseline revision for you. With every major release, pretty much of Identity Finder, we revise the baseline, and all that is a collection of the policy settings the application uses. We go through and define what we believe is best for scanning in terms of efficiency, finding the correct types of information. And in the past, you would go out, download an XML file, update your policies that way. Now we're giving you the option if you want to opt into what we're calling our Manage Baseline. We will maintain the baseline portion for you. If you work with us, you still have the ability to maintain any settings that are custom to your environment, like anything you're doing in terms of Exchange server. You get to keep your own scan schedules. We don't mess with any of that. You still do your custom includes and excludes. So it allows you to keep control of what you need to control, but you don't have to worry about watching for us to get that baseline out and you grab the XML file. Some people have more than one policy. I mean, some units have 5, 10 policies, so it can take them a little bit, depending on how their structure is, to update everything. So the whole point of that is not about us having control. It's about helping you, make this easier for you. We understand that IT staff has a lot of different things to do. So we're trying to do whatever we can to kind of take some of the burden off of you guys, let you focus more on results coming in and less on having to do the management of your policies and settings. If that's something that you're interested in, and with any Identity Finder related question, please use the PII scanning request form, which was located on the SOS website off the PII scanning webpage. That form gets into us. We can deal with that the quickest. But if you want more information about that, if you want to subscribe to that, put in a ticket. There's good information on that on the wiki. If you haven't looked at the Identity Finder wiki or the PII scanning wiki lately, strongly recommend you do that. We're added a lot of information and we're always adding new information. So.
And are there any available resources to scan your home machine?
Personally owned machines, there is a free version of Identity Finder on their website that you can use. It's not as full-featured as the enterprise version, but it gives you the ability to do all the basics you would do, scan the machine, remediate the data. That is available, identityfinder.com. We don't host that anywhere.
So we have about 7 minutes left, and while we're waiting on some questions to come through Adobe Connect, are there any questions from the classroom that anybody wants to ask? We heard a lot about different topics today: two-factor authentication, data categorization, how incident response works, if somebody's leaving your unit. We do have 2 coming through Adobe Connect.
Ted asks, if computers are re-imaged via CLM every 30 days or less, are they still required to be PII scanned?
If it's a machine where it's not saving profiles, then it doesn't have to be PII scanned. A machine if it's on a cycle of re-image every 30 days, then you still have a 30-day window there where if you get compromised and the machine's saving profiles, then yeah, that has to be scanned. The ones that we say don't have to be scanned are like what CLM calls like a kiosk build. It doesn't save any user profiles. When you log out, that profile gets destroyed. So that's the acceptable CLM case where the machine doesn't have to be scanned.
Okay, question about data categorization. Will there be any mandatory training requirements as part of that project?
Well, yeah, for data cat, there will be, for the liaisons, we currently have a letter in draft to go out to the budget executives to select the liaisons that will help with the data categorization process. We will have mandatory training for them it is of no cost. It's offered through a system called TEAKS, which is done by Texas A&M. So somebody asked about Penn State Authentication. We're working with them as well to get Penn State Authentication into that. There'll be several trainings within that TEAKS system that will require liaisons to take. They're based around basic information security and risk type of an environment. We really think that it's necessary for these liaisons to really get a good understanding about information security and the types of things that sysadmins are required to protect, and especially now that we're going to be categorizing this data, it'll be even more important to make sure that we're storing it properly and securely. So we're going to have that training available. There'll be more details coming out about that as we start doing liaison selection and having the orientation for the liaisons.
Are there any final questions? All right, well, thank you so much for your time. All of these sessions are recorded. If you'd like to look back through what we had available in the past few months, they're available on our website. And thank you for attending.